And we are back for prepping for winter, and we're talking about the second Barristan sample chapter. Now, the first Barristan sample chapter had Barristan about to head out to battle with the Unsullied, the Stormcrows, the Pit Fighters, and a handful of Dothraki. However, they are massively outnumbered, with only maybe 6,000 on Barristan's side and nearly 20,000 amongst the opposition, which is composed of legions from New Gis, Yunkish slave armies, and small other groups from neighboring cities. On top of his poor numbers, Barristan also has some weaknesses with regards to communication and the chain of command. The chapter ends with the Gates of Meereen opening, and Barristan commanding the sounding of the attack. Which brings us to the second Barristan sample chapter, except it's not so much of a sample as a summary. You see, back in 2013, George R.R. Martin did read the second Barristan sample chapter at the 50th Boscone Science Fiction Convention. No transcript exists, but a fan known as Azador took the best notes, and this is that summary. His gut feels twisted from nervousness as he rides through the gates. He knows the feeling will go away when time slows down in the chaos of battle. Dany's horse is easily outpacing the lads and the rest of the cavalry. Barristan is pleased because he intends to outrun the Widower and strike the first blow. The Yunkai are totally unprepared, and Barristan closes in on the Harridan, the largest of the trebuchets. The Stormcrows take up the cry, "Dario!" and "Stormcrows fly!" Barristan thinks he will never again doubt the valor of sellswords. And so we begin with Barristan feeling nervous, as he was in the previous chapter. Barristan spent a good deal of time trying to ease his squire's fear, but his speech may have been trying to deal with his own feelings. Now, Barristan is outpacing everyone else, which is very curious. Yes, the Silver is a good horse, and Barristan is almost certainly an adept rider, but the Stormcrows are professional cavalry. The Widower, who Barristan is racing against, is a professional horse rider. I cannot help but be reminded of Arya trying to race away from Harwin, the son of the Master of Horse. Arya, despite being very good, didn't really have a shot against an experienced professional. Now, Barristan outpacing his squires is to be expected. They were being trained for the fighting pits and had limited experience with a horse. But this cannot be said of the Stormcrows, who have spent their lives in the saddle. And all of this comes right before Barristan thinks about how he will never doubt the valor of sellswords. Of course, the valor of sellswords should be questioned. Our story tells us this. In fact, the Stormcrows calling out "Dario" and "Fly" is a bit of a callback to something Dany says in A Storm of Swords. To the captains of the Stormcrows, Dany says, "Stormcrows do not stand at all. They fly, at the first sign of thunder. Perhaps you should be flying now. I have heard that sellswords are notoriously unfaithful. What will it avail you to be staunch when the Second Sons change sides?" Now, Dany is bluffing in this passage. The Second Sons were not changing sides, but her words do seem to convince Dario to switch sides, and so he kills the other captains and the Stormcrows defect to Dany. And that is the ironic thing about what the Stormcrows are now yelling. These cries make Barristan think that the sellswords have valor, but they are yelling "Fly," a word that Dany specifically associates with disloyalty, and Dario, a notoriously disloyal man. Not to mention, Dany's question, "What will it avail you to be staunch when the Second Sons change sides?" is actually more relevant now than it was back in A Storm of Swords. Back then, the Second Sons weren't actually changing sides, but currently, they are. Now, I'm not sure what to make of the summary saying that the Yunkai are totally unprepared when Barristan approaches Harridan, as later on in this same summary, the defenders of Harridan are in fact prepared. Perhaps the defenders got their act together quickly, or perhaps Barristan is talking about the Yunkish slave soldiers being unprepared, but the legions from New Gis being prepared. The Yunkish side is a diverse and complex group of forces, some competent and some not, and it's easy to mix them all up. I'm not sure if Barristan is confused, or our author is confused, or the summary is confused. There were only 30 yards between the horse and the Yunkai legions by the time any defense is mounted. The air fills with arrows, a squire for the Stormcrows is killed, and a bolt pierces Barristan's shield. There are 3 horn blasts, and the pit fighters emerge from the gate behind them. So Barristan earlier said that time would slow down in battle, but still, a horse can ride 30 yards in 2 seconds, so I'm not sure what's going on here. It's hard to imagine arrows filling the air, Barristan looking back, noticing a squire die, and 3 horn blasts all happening in 2 seconds. Perhaps this is a super slow motion scene, or maybe the summary is somewhat out of order. Whatever the case, the bolt hitting Barristan is likely from the Illyrian crossbowmen, a group that Barristan knew was out there but didn't know where exactly. The squire dying is most likely the boy who was next to the widower carrying the Stormcrow's banner. And this may be a big deal. Confused banners is a big theme of the current battles, specifically the Battle of Steel over at Storm's End, with the Golden Company's banner looking like the Baratheon banner. Barristan told everyone to make for his banners during a charge, and although Barristan mentions the Kingsguard banner and the Targaryen banner, the Stormcrow's banner would be a third banner that one could focus on. And this squire dying means no more Stormcrow's banner. Now, last time I mentioned the importance of communication and how things might be confused with the Red Lamb, a marginal fighter, being the Hornblower. If he falls, communication for Barristan ceases, and we know that Victarion's thralls will be blowing a horn as well. Here we find out that 3 blows is Barristan's code for advance, specifically advance to his banner. And coincidentally, 3 blasts is what Victarion plans on blowing. Now, what actually will come out from Victarion's horn is unknown, but it seems certain that Barristan's army will be receiving unintended commands. Barristan glances back to see the pit fighters. There are about 200 of them, but they make enough noise for 2,000. One woman stands out, wearing nothing but greaves, sandals, a chainmail skirt, and a python. Barristan is a bit shocked and, watching her breasts bounce around, thinks that this day is surely to be her last. The pit fighters are mostly shouting Lorak and Hisdar, but some do call out Daenerys. Lorak is hit in the chest with an arrow, bringing Barristan's attention forward, but the squire keeps the banner held high and shakes it off. So here we get a more definitive number on how many pit fighters there are. 200. And this is actually low. In the Queen's Hand chapter, Cameron of the Count puts forward a scheme to seize ships to bring 300 pit fighters around to the Yunkish rear. So we can surmise that at least 100 pit fighters are missing. And again, we should remember that Bellaquo Bonebreaker and Steelskin are missing as well. What these men are up to and where these missing 100 pit fighters are is unknown. Barristan then notes a near-naked female pit fighter with a snake running forward. This is probably Cenera She-Snake, a character who was new to us last chapter. And of course, Barristan thinking that she will die naturally increases her chance of survival. We do find that the pit fighters are mostly yelling Hisdar, which does not bode well for Barristan, as his coup took Hisdar from power and put him in prison. And we should remember that Barristan is wearing armor, which is considered dishonorable and cowardly to the pit fighters. Now, quite significantly, Barristan's squire Larrick the Lash is hit with an arrow in the chest. The squire shakes it off, but realistically, the boy is a goner. Larrick will eventually drop the Kingsguard banner and die. With the Stormcrow's banner gone and the Kingsguard banner soon to be gone, that leaves one banner left, Tumco Lo's Targaryen banner. Now, I do wonder if Victarion's forces will be carrying a Targaryen banner in support of Daenerys, and I wonder if from afar, the Greyjoy banner can be differentiated from the Targaryen one. They are both largely black, just as the Baratheon banner and the Golden Company banner are largely gold. Tumco Lo later makes the differentiation, but we aren't sure if everyone can see as well as he can. Tumco is at the front, and Barristan himself cannot make out the sigil. Those at the rear or with poorer eyes may not be able to tell the difference. And so we do see a major problem here. With the Stormcrow's and Kingsguard banner gone, and who knows, Tumco Lo may be next to die, a blast from the Dragonhorn 3 times would send the army to Victarion's forces instead. Barristan has reached the Harridan, but a Giscari legion 6,000 strong has lined up to protect the huge trebuchet. They are 6 ranks deep. The first rank kneels and holds their spears pointing out and up. The second rank stands and holds their spears out at waist height. And a third rank holds their spears out on their shoulders. The rest have small throwing spears and are ready to step forward when their comrades fall. So here Barristan has reached the Harridan and the Giscari Legion there, though I'm not sure how this melds with the 30-yard claim from before, or the idea that the Yunkish forces were unprepared. This legion seems awfully prepared. Either time is super slow, or we're talking about different forces or something. Now, what is also very confusing is the claim that this is a Giscari Legion. Does Giscari mean from New Gis, or does it mean from Yunkai, because there's a huge difference between those two things. The Yunkish are incompetent slave armies, and the New Gis legions are semi-competent free men on tours of duty. Barristan says there's 6,000 of them, which would point to them being from New Gis, as Tyrion tells us that the largest slave army is 2,000. Additionally, the legions from New Gis are supposed to be armed and trained like Unsullied, which this group seems to be. That said, in the first Barristan sample chapter, Barristan specifically says that the slave armies were around the trebuchets and the legions from New Gis were in between. So it seems that someone, either Barristan or George R.R. Martin or the summary, has things mixed up. Now in A Storm of Swords, we're told that the Unsullied are trained in the way of the three spears, and in the Barristan sample chapter, Barristan describes the Unsullied as having 3 spears with them. So it seems that being trained in the way of the 3 spears is being trained with 3 different types of spears. And this legion seems to have multiple spears as well, long ones to form a spear wall and small throwing spears. If this legion is trained as the Unsullied are in the way of the 3 spears, this seems to show 2 of those 3 spears. We aren't sure what the 3rd spear would be, perhaps a medium-length spear for hand-to-hand combat. Barristan knows that a maester's chain is only as strong as his weakest link, and identifies the companies of the Yunkish lords as the weakest of his immediate foes, certainly weaker than the slave legions. In particular, Barristan targets the little pigeon and his herons. The slaves chosen to be herons were freakishly tall before they were put on stilts, and wear pink scales and feathers and steel beaks. But Barristan sees that they will be blind because of the dawn rising over the city, and like to break ranks easily, so Barristan turns away from the legion guarding the trebuchet at the last minute and heads for the herons. So here Barristan judges that the legion at Harridan of 6,000 spearmen is too strong, whoever this legion may be. The summary calls them slaves, but they sound more like a legion from New Gis who aren't slaves but freemen. However, if they are from New Gis, they shouldn't be guarding the trebuchets, as Barristan said that the Yunkish slave armies were guarding the trebuchets while the New Gis legions were in between the trebuchets. So someone is darn confused about what's going on in this battle. Anyway, Barristan searches for a weakest link in the Yunkish army. And by the way, in case you are wondering, the weakest link in a maester's chain is likely the lead link, though we don't know what field of study that corresponds to. And so Barristan makes for Little Pigeon and the herons. Now a bit on Little Pigeon. His real name is Pejar Zomorak, and he is an incredibly short man, a near dwarf, who breeds slaves to make them tall. The herons are essentially the result of genetic engineering, a favorite topic of our author. The pigeon takes tall men and women, breeds them, and then takes the tallest children for the heron army and clads them in special armor on stilts with bird helms and feathers. And I would guess that the herons are meant to parallel the others a bit. The others as well have a special breeding situation with Craster, and they take his offspring for their army and clad them in special armor. Both groups look odd and different, but fundamentally, underneath their odd armor and their odd looks, they are still human. Now, interestingly enough, Barristan thinks that the herons will be blind because of the rising sun. Blinding people with the sun was, by the way, going to be Stannis' strategy against Renly at Storm's End. Massively outnumbered, Stannis hoped to begin his attack at dawn, strike a blow, and cause chaos, and have Renly's men switch sides. And it should be noted that if Jon Khan's missing forces show up on the eastern side of Storm's End, they would be doing the same thing. And then there's the Frey army up north, which is coming in at dawn. They'll be hoping for the same advantage. However, we should remember that the blinders can become the blinded. The Frey army faces Stannis, who happens to own a sword that emits a blinding light. And here Barristan faces blindness as he's wearing a bad helm with a narrow eye slit. In the Kingbreaker chapter, Barristan examines a dragon helm given to him by Daenerys that he feels doesn't give him very good vision, and so he leaves it behind the night of the coup. However, as we discovered in the first Barristan sample chapter, Barristan is now wearing that same dragon helm, the one with wings. Although he thinks that the opposition will be blinded by the sun, he has his own vision problems that are likely to come back to haunt him. He cuts off the head of one of the herons and his lads join the fray. Dany's horse knocks a heron into 3 others, and they all fall over. In a moment, the herons are scattering and running away, led by the little pigeon himself. Unfortunately for the little pigeon, he trips over the fringes of his bird armor and gets caught by the red lamb. The little pigeon begs for mercy, saying that he will fetch a large ransom. The red lamb just says, "I came for blood, not gold," and knocks in the little pigeon's head with his mace, splattering blood all over Barristan and Dany's silver horse. And so Barristan proceeds to slaughter some herons, and the rest begin to run. This is a bit sad, as the herons are slaves who are being forced to fight, and Barristan had earlier said to try to free the slaves and have them join them. Pejar Zomorak is caught by the Red Lamb, denied the possibility for ransom, and is slaughtered as well. Interestingly, the herons are actually supposed to be some of the better fighters out there when compared to the chained-together soldiers of the Clanker Lords. Now I will say that the incident with the herons brings us back to something that Archibald Ironwood said about dragons and herons in the Windblown chapter. "Herons are craven," the big man put in. "One time me and Drink and Cletus were hunting, and we came on these herons wading in the shallows, feasting on tadpoles and small fish. They made a pretty sight, aye, but then a hawk passed overhead, and they took to a wing like they'd seen a dragon. Kicked up so much wind it blew me off my horse. But Cletus knocked an arrow to his string and brought one down. Tasted like duck, but not so greasy." Now, of course, this is what effectively is happening. The herons are seeing what looks to be a dragon coming upon them, and they flee. We have Barristan dressed as a dragon. He is in a dragon helm wearing white and gold, the colors of Viserion, and his squire is carrying a dragon banner. And he comes upon the herons, who scatter and flee almost immediately. The troubling part of Arch's story, though, is that the wind from the herons knocks Arch from his saddle. I do wonder if someone is about to be dehorsed. And this is a good place to stop. We will finish up with the Barristan 2 summary next time, and we will discuss what will likely happen to Barristan next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.